Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome to World of Tanks as you've never seen it before. I'm currently on the Sandbox test server taking a look at Wargaming's new high-definition maps, and you also might be confused as to the quality of this YouTube video, and that's because it's going to be the first on the channel in 4K at 30 frames per second. But don't worry, it's not going to be around for long. This is a one-off just to show the glory of Wargaming's new high-definition maps. So firstly, a lot of you might be thinking, is this a brand new map on the Sandbox test server? I've never seen a mountain range like that in World of Tanks. Well, if I go up here a little bit, it might become a little bit more obvious to you which map this is. This is the HD version of Steppes. And the first thing you'll probably notice if you log into the Sandbox test server is that Wargaming have really fleshed out the surrounding to the map. And while the map itself is still 1 by 1 kilometer, Wargaming have just made the surroundings absolutely glorious. And so even if you make your way towards the edges of the map, you've still got some eye candy, and I just think it improves the overall aesthetic dramatically. And it's not just the grass that looks incredible. Wargaming have really pushed the boundaries with what water looks like in a game that, gosh, now 6-7 years old. Another thing I really like about the HD maps is Wargaming have fleshed them out with some incredible focal points. For example, to the north of the northern spawn on Steppes, look at this, it's Gustav. This is the biggest railway gun ever, which fired, I believe, 800mm shells. And just to show you the detail, even though you couldn't see this because this is the edge of the map, Wargaming have modeled things that you'd actually never be able to see unless you had a free camera like this. Deutsche Reichsbahn Essen. And it's little things like this that really show you the detail that they've gone to. But Gustav is not the only cool key feature of some of the maps. Take a look on Himmelsdorf, for example. If we leave the central square and make our way all the way towards the west, oh yeah, that looks a lot like the Bismarck sunk in the harbor of Himmelsdorf. And while the gameplay on this map is pretty much unchanged, just the surroundings make you feel like you're in a unique location compared to what you were previously. And what Wargaming have done with the surroundings of Himmelsdorf is a lot like Steppes. It just feels like you're in a completely unique area, whereas previously the maps felt very confined and they kind of all blended into one. Redshire is also a great example of this, firstly because there's a fallen Zeppelin that you can actually play around with, but this is where the gameplay differences might come into effect. With all this extra height, previously it was only these rocks that could protect you from artillery. Now artillery is going to find it a lot harder to try and hit in rounds past the fallen Zeppelin, but there's something really special about cresting the ridge here and overlooking the battlefield. And I still can't get over just how darn cool those trees look, at least compared to what we previously had. There are also squadrons of planes flying through the sky and more Zeppelins as well to feast your eyes upon. And one thing you might also notice when we look at the sky is the clouds now actually move, whereas previously I believe it was just some kind of dome shape. Another thing that Wargaming have tried to do is to make the different maps feel like they belong to the different areas of the world that they were based on. For example, these very English-looking houses. And while previously the ruined gatehouse that you could play around with towards the west of Redshire looked completely barren by itself, now it's got an entire castle behind it. And while you can't venture forth into it, at least it looks cool. And just to show you how dramatic these changes are, let's play a little game. I'll give you 5 seconds, or at least until the end of when I stop talking, to figure out which map this is. And when I first got on it, I had to press my tab key to figure it out. Yeah, this is Cliff. Can you believe it? It just looks absolutely outrageous. And while of course you do have that, I guess, somewhat disappointing red line that goes all the way around the edge of the map, things have just never looked so cool. And while it's still got that same World of Tanks gameplay that you'll be familiar with, it just feels almost as if it's World of Tanks 2.0. Let's go and have a look at the waves as well. There's a swell of the ocean as it comes in. Wargaming have also added in new effects for when you fire your guns. Check out this pressure wave as I fire 105mm from the Sheridan. Do you also notice how all the vegetation reacts to the pressure coming in from the shell? And also the desert maps have been given the same kind of treatment. Take a look at this. This is Sand River. And I love the new kind of orangey tinge that they've given to the desert. Take a look at some of the heat swell coming off the land, as we can see there blurring your vision. And little bits of sand flaking off the edges. Buildings themselves feel very much more detailed, and just like with Redshire, you're getting a different flavor from the different maps. And when you zoom out to positions like this and you turn the UI off, you've got to question whether you're still playing the same game, but yeah, then you just press your tab, you get your menus up, and you're right back in there, but for some reason I seem to be AFK. Oh, there we go. Oh, this should be an interesting moment, actually. I remember this. There's some... Oh, well, maybe not my driving, but here we go. Here comes a 4K Amarak. Yep, not too bad. Oh my word, look how cool that looks. I'm sorry for fanboying out or freaking out, guys, as that Sheridan went through the water. I have to admit, I first saw this at Wargaming Fest last year. You'll know that in my Future of World of Tanks video that I released towards the end of 2016, that I showed a few of the HD maps. I also managed to play on them at Wargaming Fest, and I managed to play them a little bit when I went to the Minsk offices during the summer, and I checked them out at Gamescom as well. If you're wondering why the FPS is bad here, it's because I'm actually in a different part of the map, and the FPS is obviously bad unless you're in the near vicinity. And really my overall conclusion is this is the biggest change to the game since 8.0, which was my favorite patch in the last 6 to 7 years, the one that added in the physics and really started to ramp up the graphics of the game. Look how the Sheridan actually leaves indentations in the sand as it drives away. And now I just want to show you guys one of my favorite things when you go through the water in World of Tanks. Look at the waves. Oh, we've actually got a little bit too deep here. We're going for a little bit of a dip, but check this out. Once you've actually submerged yourself underwater, your tank changes color and it glistens more until it dries off when you've been driving around and sitting in the sun a little bit. Once again, showing attention to detail, and let's just hope people aren't trying to drown themselves just to look cool when this gets released. So now I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there that you might be asking about this, and let me just try and talk through what I think are probably going to be the most frequently asked ones. Number one, does this require an absolute monster computer to be able to play? Well, for me personally, I do have a really good computer, but it was running just as well with the previous graphics as it was with these ones. I was using up pretty much about 50% of my graphics processing unit, my GPU, my graphics card, to be able to run this game at full HD, aka 1080p at 60 FPS on maximum graphic settings. Next, a lot of you might be asking, well, I don't want to run the game at maximum graphic settings. Will I still be able to play, or are these new graphics going to be forced upon me? Well, I actually turned the graphics to absolute potato, as I'm going to be calling it, or minimum, and the game ran, I think, at 500 FPS with my setup. And so don't worry, these HD maps, as far as I can tell at the moment, aren't going to prevent people who can already play the game from playing it. But it's going to add a lot of detail for those of you who have computers capable of running it at maximum settings. So next you might be asking, how many maps are currently available in HD on the Sandbox test server? Well, the answer is 12, which is about a third of the total maps that are currently in the game. Now, Wargaming have said it takes them about 2 months to make each one of those standard definition maps HD, so in theory, we might be looking at it taking them, I guess, a year or two to be able to make all of the maps that are currently in the game HD, unless they can manage to speed up the process. And so that leads on to the next question you might have. When are we going to be able to see this in the game? Well, while there's no official release date so far, I've got a real feeling that Wargaming will try to push out at least the 12 maps that they've done currently for this holiday season, because unless they pull something out in the next couple of months, I can't see what they're going to be adding in. If we think about all of the content that Wargaming has released, the holiday season is the most important period for World of Tanks. Every year they release a big tech tree. Last year in 2016, it was 2 Swedish tech trees. Before that, in 2015, it was the Czechoslovakian medium tanks. And before that, I believe it was either Japanese heavies or Japanese mediums. And considering that Wargaming just threw in the Chinese tank destroyers with pretty much no fanfare, and I can't think of another tech tree that they're going to be releasing, because usually they've given us a sneak peek at Gamescom or some kind of previous event. I really feel that this has to be their hard-hitting holiday content. But that's not official. I might be completely wrong, but we'll just have to see what happens. And I think it would be wonderful if they release this around about the Christmas period. If maybe some of you need to upgrade your graphics card to be able to run the game on maximum settings. And I think you'll probably be able to run 60 FPS at maximum settings at full HD with something like a 1060. But please don't quote me on that. And remember, this is all subject to change. Wargaming might increase the requirements, they might make it more efficient and improve the quality of the graphics, or just lower what you will be required to be able to run it at a decent rate. And so I guess then it poses the question, what would you, ladies and gentlemen out there, rather have? Would you rather Wargaming wait for 6 months, a year until they can get more than 12 maps in HD? Or do you think they should just put them in the game as soon as they possibly can and then add subsequent maps as they finish them with patches of other content? And so really, that about covers it. That was my preview of the Sandbox test server and Wargaming's new high definition maps. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments down below all of your thoughts about what Wargaming have presented here. Does it pose you any further questions that I didn't answer in that kind of mini FAQ? And finally, I'd like to say that while there are a lot of things in the last 12 months that Wargaming have undoubtedly done wrong, it looks like they've been working really hard on this, and I think this could be the greatest addition to the game since patch 8.0. Wargaming, please focus on things like this. There is no doubt that this is going to bring back old players to World of Tanks, and when you brand your game to new players who haven't played the game yet, more people are going to be interested because the game looks like a AAA title rather than something that has kind of been patched up from an engine that wasn't even really probably conceived to have the longevity that World of Tanks has. But also, we must mention that HD maps are not a replacement for balanced maps, and they're not a replacement for new maps. And so now you've shown what you can really do, it's time to spend some of that money that you get from all those tier 8 premium tanks you've been pushing on us and make your game a AAA title. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.